Hello, and welcome to the Acton-Boxborough School Building Project Online Public Forum. My name is Christina Richlick, and I'm a member of the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee and the subcommittee studying our building options for our district. Thank you for watching today. We're really interested in getting your feedback as part of our district master plan process. To set the stage, first I'll describe the work that we've done to date on our district master plan and our process moving forward. We will then review some of the key characteristics of each option that we're presenting, which should make the options easier to understand when I describe them. Lastly, I'll review 7 options with you and then get your feedback, focusing on which options should be eliminated at this point in the process. We've adapted this presentation for you to view online. To make it easy to follow, you'll want to print at least 2 of our handouts. First, go to the Capital and Space Planning portion of our website and click on Online Public Forum. There you'll find 2 documents you'll find helpful to use to follow along. One is a matrix of current options, and one is a short list of master planning options that's color-coded. In that same area of the website, that's where you'll return after viewing to submit your feedback electronically. Along the way, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at abbuilding@abschools.org. Starting with some background, in 2015, we hired Doran Whittier Architects to assess all 9 of our school building facilities with a focus on the condition of the buildings, renovations and improvements needed for long-term viability of the buildings, safety and capacity. This resulted in a capital improvement plan that identified $120 million in needs, and this is to address the current conditions only, not educational or space needs. The study showed that most of the building and space issues were at Douglas, Conant, and Gates, 3 of our elementary schools. In 2016, Doran Whittier assessed the educational and instructional needs of all of our facilities. They looked at capacity and utilization, considering the MSBA guidelines for space, and focused on current and future educational needs. MSBA stands for the Massachusetts School Building Authority, but I'll talk more about them later. This process involved input from principals through 6 workshops and from a visioning group that involved more than 80 school and community members over 3 day-long workshops. In addition, Doran Whittier's work was supported by a capital working group that included school administrators, school committee members, and representatives from both towns' finance committees and Board of Selectmen. This input resulted in 3 preferred building and renovation options for our district that we will present today, along with a status quo option for your review. Here we have a timeline for 2017. Some highlights I'd like to share. We were recently selected by the Mass School Building Authority for a project that involves the Douglas School. I'm thrilled to report that we are one of 17 districts that have been accepted to be partners with the MSBA in funding a new building project for our district. There were 89 applicants, so the fact that we were accepted speaks not only to our need at the Douglas School, but how fortunate we feel to be part of this process. As a part of this, by early June, we need to decide which of our building options are off the table, and that's where your input comes in today. After we make recommendations to the school committee on which options to get rid of, the school committee will work with the MSBA over the summer to help refine those options. Lastly, on December 4th, we will convene special town meetings in Acton and Boxborough to request funds for a project manager and design funds. If those funds are approved, we'll then move into the design phase of the project. We're really interested in your feedback on which of these options that I'm going to present should be eliminated. We understand that it's a really complicated process because we're trying to address many problems at the same time. You'll see as I talk more, we're trying to address overcrowding, inadequate space, and aging facilities all concurrently. I honestly wish it were just as easy as we just need one new school, but it's not. To make the options easier to understand, we're first going to review some of the key characteristics of the options, starting with the size and configurations of the schools. You'll see that some of the options refer to single schools, whereas others put forward a twin school or a triple school as an option. If you're not familiar with those terms, a twin school is like the Parker Damon building in Acton, which is one building that houses two school programs under the same roof. In this case, it's the Merriam and the McCarthy Town Elementary Schools. A triple school would be one building that houses three school programs under one roof. Twin and triple schools can be appealing as a way to save money because those buildings, while they're larger, they house two or three schools that have some shared spaces. The Parker Damon building has two schools that share a cafeteria, a gym, and a library. So while we have some experience with twin schools at the Parker Damon building, we also realize that there have been some issues with them as well, and we would be sure to try to address those issues moving forward if one of the options we choose is another twin school. We're also planning to do a review of the pros and cons of twin, single, and triple schools as a part of this process to help guide our decisions. Next, we're considering grade configurations. In terms of grade configurations, right now we have pre-K programs within our district at the administration building or the old Merriam building in Acton and at the Blanchard Elementary Schools. Then all of our elementary schools are kindergarten through 6th grade, and the junior high has grades 7 through 8. However, through this process, we could decide to change that. One consideration you'll hear me talk about is an early childhood center, which would house the pre-kindergarten and the kindergarten students. If we did this, then the elementary schools would just be grades 1 through 6. We could also decide to move the 6th grade up to the junior high and make it a traditional middle school with grades 6 to 8. If we did that, then the elementary schools would only go up to grade 5. Just a little background on the early childhood center idea. As I mentioned, our preschools currently are at 2 sites, one in Acton at the administration or Old Merriam building and one in Boxborough at the Blanchard School. In looking at the benefits of an early childhood center, it could be designed to meet the specific needs of those younger students. We could consolidate specialized services all in one location, and it could increase collaboration between the pre-K and the kindergarten teachers. It would also allow us to be more flexible with half-day and full-day kindergarten classes and likely be able to fully meet the demand from families for all-day kindergarten. An early childhood center would also address space issues at the elementary school. We talk about how an early childhood center could help right-size our current buildings. And that's because by pulling the kindergarten classrooms out of those buildings, it would open up between 2 and 4 additional classrooms at each elementary school. Some challenges with an early childhood center. First, no pre-kindergarten or kindergarten classes would be sited in Boxborough. Further, some have expressed concerns about the transitions for our students. There would be an additional transition between kindergarten and 1st grade. And although pre-kindergarten and kindergarten teachers would have collaboration, we expect there would be less of that between kindergarten and 1st grade teachers. Some background on a potential 6 to 8 middle school for Acton-Boxborough. Moving to this model has pros and cons as well. In a middle school model, 6th graders would benefit from the current junior high team model, and there would be fewer transitions for these middle school students. For those of you who have or have had students at the junior high, it feels like all of a sudden they're transitioning in and then quickly they're transitioning out. This would provide a little more stability and time to build community at that age. 6th grade teachers would also become subject matter experts. Instead of teaching all the subjects, they would specialize, as they do in the junior high most likely, in a language or math or science. There would be greater alignment with the state standards, and this option would also help to right-size the elementary schools by opening up the 6th grade classrooms. In terms of challenges, this middle school, however, would be quite large at about 1,300 students. And under this model, we would have to renovate the junior high first, which would delay the time at which we can address our elementary school building needs. This approach could also reduce collaboration then between 5th and 6th grade teachers. So we have more information on the pros and cons of early childhood centers and middle schools on our website. You can check that out for more information. Moving on to other characteristics that we're considering here. The next is phases of the project and time to completion as well as cost. The phases and time to completion are linked. So you'll see options that are done in one phase. They take about 7 years to complete. Some options are two-phased and they take about 14 years to complete, and options that require 3 phases take about 21 years to complete. I know you're probably thinking, how old am I going to be in 21 years? So clearly, one phase is faster and addresses our needs more immediately. But I do want to point out that multiple phases can provide us with some more flexibility. For example, if we start one phase and 5 to 7 years our student population dramatically increases, at a second phase we can address that increased growth with a new, larger building. The costs that we show for each option include the project costs, but also the capital improvement costs to upgrade and repair the remaining facilities throughout the district. Note that at this time, these are really broad estimates with contingency and inflation costs built in. So one question that we've gotten in the forums that we've done so far is, does it really take 7 years to build a building? And the answer to that is no, it does not take 7 years. But the entire process on average does take 6 to 7 years. And the reason for that is to get to the point where we are right now, it's already been about 1.5 years. Then we have another 1/2 to 3/4 of a year to get to design funds, and then time to design the building, and then come back to the towns for building funds, and then the time for construction. Throughout that process, there may be times to have to go back to the drawing board, to have to go back to the community, and I think that's been the experience in other districts. So while I'm sure some districts can build a school or schools quicker than 6 to 7 years, that's the average, and that's what we're using at this point in our process. I also want to move to discuss school programs and sites as a criteria that we're considering. You'll see that the options focus on the Douglas, Conant, and Gates schools, since this is where the most building and space issues have been identified. If we were to build a twin or a triple school, it would probably be built on the Gates property. Looking at the property that the school district currently owns, the Gates site is really the best site for a large building. The Conant site has wetlands issues. And I know it does, if you know those properties well, I know many of us were really surprised that the Gates site is actually the preferred site for a new large building. If we build or significantly renovate single schools, then there is flexibility in which the schools we work with. But we have to remember that Douglas is a priority because we've already been accepted into the MSBA program for Douglas, and we'd want to take advantage of the cost reimbursement that provides us. You'll also note as I go through the options that some reduce the numbers of school programs that we have. So currently we have 6 elementary schools with 6 elementary school programs. We have 5 buildings because Parker Damon has 2 elementary schools. Each elementary school currently has a different approach or philosophy. Some of the options that I'm going to talk about reduce the programs from 6 to 5, and one option even reduces that to 4. As part of the building design process, we will define the educational focus for each program in any new buildings. The school community and the community at large will be involved in this process. So at this time, we don't know what those changes will be. For example, through the process, we might decide to merge 2 of the approaches together. Or since we're designing new space, we could decide on a new approach that might not have been possible in one of the old buildings. And this will be part of the planning over the next several years. I'm hoping that we can think about this as an opportunity to really optimize what we have and perhaps come up with something even better. Next, we look at educational and instructional space. Each of the new building or significant renovation options that we will talk about addresses the educational and the instructional space needs. Options 1 to 6 all address our current situation of overcrowding and provide appropriate educational spaces across the board. For example, right now in some of our elementary schools, we have services like occupational therapy that have to take place in a hallway. The new models will move this service into appropriate and private space. Note in option 7, the status quo option, we are not able to address instructional and educational space needs like that. This option only fixes current infrastructure as we have it now. Through the new building or significant renovation options, we aim for the elementary school programs to house between 400 and 500 students. The principals and the visioning group felt that this was the ideal size for our program. Ideally, an elementary school at 400 to 500 students, approximately 3 classes at each grade, is understood to be best for socialization of our students and collaboration among teachers. So although options 1 to 6 all address the educational and instructional space needs, the timing to address those needs varies by the phases and the timing of those options. Next, I'm going to cover our MSBA funding options. The Massachusetts School Building Authority is a quasi-governmental organization that provides expertise and funding for new school buildings and renovations of public schools. They have one program that provides funds for new building or significant renovations, and that's the program that we have been accepted into. We've been accepted for Phase 1 for a project that involves the Douglas Elementary School. If we select options that have multiple phases, we would have to reapply for subsequent phases, and we may or may not be invited into the MSBA process for those new projects. The MSBA will provide reimbursement for all the approved parts of a project. For example, if they work with us and we decide to design a twin school of an agreed upon size, but then our community decides we want it to be larger by adding 2 special additional spaces, the MSBA will only reimburse us for the original agreed upon size, and the community would have to pay for the difference. They reimburse based on a formula, and so while we don't know that reimbursement rate yet, we estimate it to be somewhere in the range of 30 to 45%. So we provide a range of estimates when I provide cost estimates for each option. The MSBA also has an accelerated repair program which we can use for system improvements. This addresses systems such as windows, doors, and heating systems, and we can use these for repairs when we can, but the reimbursement rate is much lower. So, to move on to our current building and renovation options. Beginning with option 1. Option 1 is a new twin elementary school and a renovated early childhood center. In this option, the twin school would house 2 elementary programs, and the renovated building would house the early childhood center. The 6 current elementary school programs would be reduced to 5 programs. The project would take place over 2 phases and 14 years. We've been accepted into MSBA for Phase 1, but would have to submit a new application for Phase 2, which may or may not be accepted. The lifespan of the new and renovated buildings is 50 years, and we estimate that the Phase 1 would cost about $107 million, and the total costs with the remaining capital improvement projects would be about $240 million. With MSBA reimbursement, we expect Phase 1 to cost between $59 and $75 million for a total cost of $165 to $191 million. Now, we've gotten some questions in our other forums that we've done. If you do this option or another option like this, which schools go into the twin school? In this option, a twin school with 2 elementary schools would house the existing populations of Douglas, Gates, and Conant. We also have gotten a lot of questions about what happens to the Douglas property in an option like this, where a new twin school would be built on the Gates site and Douglas goes away. At this point, we're talking about considering the Douglas and Gates property as a campus and being able to use the Douglas property to support the Gates campus with things like additional recreational opportunities, playing fields, and probably additional parking as well. I don't think there's a school around that has enough parking. Now, those of you familiar with those sites realize that they are next to each other and connected only by a wooden bridge walkway. So that would be something we would have to make the 2 sites be easier to access between each other, probably something drivable and plowable as well. Details for that are not set at this point yet, though. So moving on to option 2. In option 2, we would have a new twin elementary school and then a new single elementary school. In this option, a new twin school and a new single school. In this option, the twin school would house 1 elementary program and the early childhood center, and the new single school would house another elementary program. The 6 current elementary programs would be reduced to 5. The project would take place over 2 phases and 14 years. We've been accepted into the MSBA process for Phase 1 and would have to reapply for Phase 2. The lifespan of these new and renovated buildings, or all new buildings, would be 50 years. And we estimate that Phase 1 would cost about $100 million, and the total costs with the remaining capital improvements would be $249 million. With MSBA reimbursement, we expect Phase 1 to cost $55 to $70 million, and the total cost to be $170 to $197 million. Moving on to Option 3. Option 3 is a new triple school. The triple school would house 2 elementary programs and an early childhood center. The 6 current elementary school programs would be reduced to 5. The project would take place in 1 phase over 7 years. Our current MSBA approval would cover this project. The lifespan of the new building is 50 years. And we estimate that Phase 1 would cost about $159 million, and the total costs with the remaining capital improvement projects would be about $232 million. With MSBA reimbursement, we expect Phase 1 to cost $88 to $112 million, and the total cost to be $161 to $185 million. Now, when we've talked about this option in our other forums, we do get questions about traffic concerns of putting a large 3-school building on the Gates property. As you know, the Gates School is currently located in West Acton Village. There is residential and commercial space surrounding it, a train track, and it is densely populated. There has not yet been a traffic study. If this ends up being a model that the community really wants us to look into, one of the first things we would do would have to be a traffic study. But studies like that are expensive, and it would be wasteful to do unless we really decide that we want to go down this path. Moving on to Option 4. Option 4 involves renovating the current junior high to become a middle school, building a new elementary school, and renovating a building for an early childhood center. The renovated junior high would house grades 6 to 8. All the elementary schools would house grades 1 to 5, and the renovated building would house the early childhood center. The 6 current elementary school programs would be reduced to 4 programs because kindergarten and 6th grade students would no longer be in the elementary schools. Thus, only 4 programs would be needed for our population. The project would take place in 3 phases over 21 years. Because the junior high renovation would have to occur first, we would have to decline our current MSBA offer and reapply for all 3 phases of this project. Additionally, because the junior high needs are not as critical as our elementary needs, especially those needs at Douglas, we might not be accepted into MSBA for that phase for some time. We may not, in fact, have the luxury of time needed to pursue this option. The lifespan of the new and renovated buildings in this option is 50 years, and we estimate that Phase 1 would cost about $75 million, and the total costs with the remaining capital improvements would be about $279 million. With MSBA reimbursement, we expect Phase 1 to cost $41 to $53 million, and the total cost to be $175 to $210 million. Moving on to Option 5. Option 5 involves 3 significant elementary school renovations. In this option, Douglas, Conant, and Gates all receive significant renovations. The grades would remain kindergarten through 6th grade in all elementary schools, and the pre-kindergarten programs would remain as they are and where they are in Acton and Boxborough. The 6 current elementary school programs would be maintained. The project would take place in 3 phases over 21 years. We've been accepted into MSBA for Phase 1, but would need to submit new applications for Phase 2 and 3. The lifespan of the renovated buildings is 50 years. We estimate that Phase 1 would cost about $53 million, and the total cost with the remaining capital improvement projects would be about $280 million. With MSBA reimbursement, we expect Phase 1 to cost $29 to $37 million, and the total cost to be $195 to $224 million. At our last forum, someone asked, is there an option to build 3 new schools? This could be it. Prior to each renovation project, it would need to be determined if it's more cost-effective to actually renovate the school or to build it new, and the more cost-effective option would be chosen. In addition, it's important to remember with this that our pre-K programs remain status quo. They remain where they are, and the admin building, the old Merriam building, has many significant needs, just as these older elementary schools do as well. Moving on to option 6, we're almost there. Option 6 is a new twin elementary school and a new single school. The twin school would house 2 elementary programs, and the new single school would house a 3rd elementary program. The 6 current elementary school programs would be maintained. The project would take place in 2 phases over 14 years. We've been accepted into MSBA for phase 1, but would have to submit a new application for phase 2. The lifespan of the new buildings is 50 years. We estimate that phase 1 would cost about $100 million, and the total costs with the remaining capital improvement projects would be about $263 million. With MSBA reimbursement, we expect phase 1 to cost about $55 to $70 million, and the total cost to be $186 to $212 million. Lastly, option 7. All of the schools would receive minor renovations and continue with their current programs. The elementary schools would remain K-6 programs, and the pre-K programs would remain as they are in Acton and Boxborough. The 6 current elementary school programs would be maintained, but this option would not address the overcrowding and instructional space needs at each of the elementary programs. The renovations would be ongoing at the schools over 20 years. We would decline our current MSBA invitation and use only the accelerated repair program, which would require many applications over the years. The lifespan of the renovated buildings is only expected to be 10 years, since this does not address all of the needs. We expect that the total cost would be about $120 million. With MSBA reimbursement, which we estimate at 1 to 5% for this program, we expect the cost to range from $115 to $119 million. One thing I would like to point out, this option does not allow for that right sizing of all of our elementary buildings. And currently, the way our current buildings are sized, we have some schools that may have 2 sections at one grade and 3 sections at another, and back to 2 sections, and it's a way for us to manage the population within the space that we have. But it does make it challenging in terms of having to move teachers around and the size of the populations of the schools. So this does not allow for the right sizing to address the space constraints that are currently at our schools. So those are all of our options. I just want to take a moment to highlight some key milestones as we move ahead. Right now, we're in the process of soliciting community feedback from people like you, online and at public forums in person. At the end of May, our subcommittee will recommend which options to move forward to the school committee. The school committee will then vote and share their recommendation with the MSBA. On December 4th, we plan to have concurrent town meetings in Acton and Boxborough to vote on the design funds, and then, if approved, we will move into the design phase of this project. When that phase is done, we will return to town meeting in both towns to vote building funds. So one thing, by watching this online, unfortunately I'm not able to share what is really a valuable part of the in-person forums that we've been doing. After the presentation, we've spent about a half an hour to 45 minutes answering questions for people. And I think that has been an experience where it allows the information to gel and allows people to get their questions asked. Since we can't do that online, I'd like to point you to our website where we have an FAQ, or frequently asked questions, document. And if you have any questions that you don't see answered there, please feel free to email us at abbuilding@abschools.org. Lastly, thank you for watching, and please go online to the Capital and Space Planning portion of the abschools.org website and click on Online Public Forum. There you'll find an electronic feedback form for you to provide us with your information about the options you prefer today.